All right, welcome back. Day 2 of chapter 1.1. So, which of the following numbers are integers? So, we got to remember what integers are. Integers are whole numbers and their opposites. So, negative whole numbers. So, get rid of anything with decimals, get rid of anything with fractions unless they're improper fractions and will simplify to a whole number or integer. So, first one I see is 9. What's the next one? -1 and 15. So those are all integers. Now, what is the absolute value of a number? So remember what we did yesterday. Absolute value of a number. Hopefully, you think it's the distance a number is away from 0. So it's how far a number is away from 0. Remember, absolute value of -5 would be 5. Absolute value of +5 would also be 5. So absolute values are how far it is from 0. Then when we compare two rational numbers, we got to figure out which one's bigger or smaller, or if they're equal. So 3.5 is easy. Put that on the number line. 3.5, that's 3.5. Now, absolute value of -7/2. Absolute value means it's 7/2, which is 7 divided by 2, and we get 3.5. So they are both 3.5. That means we use the equal sign. 11/4, absolute value, so it's going to be positive. 11 divided by 4 gives me 2.75. So 2.75 is going to be right here between 2.7 and 2.8. So it's going to go right about there, halfway in between. This one, absolute value of -2.8 is 2.8. So that one goes right there. Now remember, the one that is bigger is the one that is furthest to the right on the number line. So it's this one right here. So it's 2.8. So which inequality symbol would show us that the absolute value of -2.8 is bigger? It's going to be the less than symbol. Remember, it almost looks like an L if you tilt it a little bit. So less than. It's eating the bigger one. Okay, so let's think about this. You compare two numbers, A and B. Explain how A can be greater than B and the absolute value of A is less than the absolute value of B. Can both be true statements? So think about that. You can pause the video if you want. So I'm going to say, okay, what if we said 1 or 2? Let's say A is 2 and B could be 1. Absolute value of 2 is 2 and absolute value of 1 is 1. Did that work? Nope, because 2 is not less than 1 when you do the absolute value. But what if I use these? What if I say A is 4 and B is -5? So let's check that out. So 4 is bigger than -5, greater than, yep. So absolute value of 4 is 4. Absolute value of -5 is 5. 4 is less than 5. So it does work. So basically, whatever A is, B has to have a greater absolute value. So it has to be bigger than the 4. And it probably has to be a negative. So that way it'll be smaller than that one. So there's an example where they both can be true using 4 and -5. What about this one? Which one doesn't belong? So which one doesn't belong with the other three? and explain your reasoning. So let's look at the first one. Absolute value of 6 is 6. That one's 6. That one's negative 6. And the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. So which one doesn't belong? Correct. The negative 6 does not belong. Alright, word problem. I know people hate word problems, but you want to see if you can break them down. Alright, so Moon has an ocean underneath its icy surface. Scientists run tests above and below the surface. The table shows the elevations of each test. Which test is deepest? Which test is closest to the surface? So they kind of say, hey, use a vertical line graph, number line. So here they put all of them on the number line. So when we're looking for the deepest one, that's kind of easy. It's this one right here, salinity. But when we're looking for which one is closest to the surface, it's between these two. These two are both pretty close. So what we're going to do is find the absolute value of them. So the absolute value of the atmosphere is 0.3, and the absolute value of the ice is 0.25. So which one's closest to 0? Hopefully you're saying the ice, because 0.2 is smaller than 0.3, so it's closer to 0. So on that one, ice is the closest to the surface, and salinity test is the deepest. Alright. There you go. Alright. An airplane is at an elevation of 0.5 miles. A submarine is at an elevation of negative 10.9 kilometers. Which is closest to sea level? Now this one, you really would need to pause it to do it, because watch your labels. Do you notice how this one has miles and this one has kilometers? So if they don't have the same label, you can't compare the numbers. So we're going to change the kilometers into miles. So what I did was I just asked Siri, hey Siri, negative 10.9 kilometers is how many miles? And Siri told me it's about negative 6.77. So now we can compare these. 5.5 for the airplane, negative 6.77 for the miles for the submarine. So which one's closest to 0? Airplane. Airplane is closest to 0. All right, let's try this one. This should be the last one. The image shows the corrective powers in diopters of contact lenses for 8 people. The farther the number of the diopters is from 0, the greater the power of the lens. Positive diopters correct farsightedness, and negative diopters correct nearsightedness. So, who is the most nearsighted? Oh, hold on. So, we're looking for nearsighted. Nearsighted, remember, is the negative, so the furthest way away from 0. So, what's the negative number that we're looking for that you think would give us the most nearsighted? So hopefully you said, if we look at these, I would say person number 7, because negative 7.5, that's the furthest one to the left. And the most farsighted would be the greatest positive number. So looking at the positive numbers down here, it looks like number 3. And then who has the best eyesight? That would be the person that's closest to 0. So which one's closest to 0? Number 2, 0.75. All right, so you will go ahead and work on your homework now. Remember to use the check button and do the best you can.